Hey guys, today I'm going to take a bit of a deeper look at a company that I've talked about a few times as of late. It's a company I've been buying fairly aggressively here in 2021. And I think is a bit of a sleeping giant that could 3x from here over the next 5 years. Even longer term, I think it'd be more of a gain than that. And that company is Pinterest, ticker PINS or PINS. I think they just got a lot of room to run, a lot of good things going on. And even with the bit of a rise it's had lately, it's actually recovered quite nicely after selling off over 30% during some of that high growth tech sell-off. It's kind of right back near all-time highs, but I think it still trades at a relatively reasonable evaluation. So let's take a deeper look at Pinterest. And before we do that, just if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and it'd be great also if you'd like this video. So Pinterest falls within the social media category, but obviously it's quite a bit different than a lot of these more social platforms. It's more of a project-based site or app that people go to for inspiration for specific projects or specific interests. So obviously like DIY projects around the house, but also things like cooking are big on interest, fitness, finance even, you name it. Basically all types of interests and categories on Pinterest integrate seamlessly into the platform, and people are visiting it for a wider range of inspiration for different set of hobbies and interests and that sort of thing. And some of the data coming out is just phenomenal as far as ad conversion rates, engagement on the site, user demographics. It's all just seems to be really early stages and growing incredibly fast. They're also putting a lot of development into video and continuing to develop the site to more seamless, be sort of like basically an organic shopping experience for advertisers as well. So really, really interesting stuff. But let's look at some of the data that at least stood out to me for Pinterest. One is their monthly active users are now up to 459 million. At the beginning of 2020, that was about 300 million. So they're adding monthly active users really quickly. Engagement is way up on the platform, really growing quickly. And that's quite big. It's still about 1/6 that of Facebook, which is obviously the behemoth in the space, the largest social media platform. But it's actually, Pinterest is actually quite a bit bigger than, say, Twitter, which is just over 350 million monthly active users. And 80% of millennial women are on Pinterest. And it's not just women, we're actually seeing huge growth in men using Pinterest as the product categories and topics that are now people are engaging with on Pinterest is growing immensely. It's about 40% male now. About 60% of users are women. So still dominant, but nothing like it used to be. And we're seeing younger demographics pick up and get interest in Pinterest. I think we're seeing massive growth in Generation Z using Pinterest as well. I think that was up around 50% also in 2020. And 50% of US pinners or Pinterest users frequently shop on Pinterest. So it really is becoming a really organic shopping experience, which I mentioned already, where basically you can use Pinterest to basically shop for products without being like stuck to a platform, like going on to Amazon or Etsy or Wayfair or whatever it is. And actually about 25% of time on Pinterest is spent actually shopping. So really, obviously that's going to be appealing to advertisers to get on there. So you can have a sponsored pin, and with their partnership with Shopify for small businesses, they have buy buttons directly integrated into Pinterest, so you can like be getting inspiration for a project you're working on, and one of these small businesses can pay for advertising space and have a buy button for their product that inspired you right there on the site. Really natural, organic experience. It doesn't feel like advertising at all. People that use Pinterest are 3 times more likely to actually click on an ad because of this seamless approach they have than on any other social media platform. And advertisers are flocking towards Pinterest in a big, big way. So the number of advertisers utilizing this direct shopping experience is up 6 times in 2020. And that increased ad spend and new advertising customers is showing up in the top line revenues. We saw about 50% annual revenue growth in 2020, and we're expected to see continued 50% or so revenue growth in 2021. So extremely, extremely high growth. All right, guys, let's look at some numbers here for Pinterest and where I think this stock could be in 5 years from now. It's currently trading at a share price at $85.53 a share, and that gives it a market cap of $54 billion. And just looking at that right there, that's way smaller than a company like, say, Facebook, which is a $890 billion company. And now by no means do I think Pinterest is going to be as large as Facebook anytime soon, but I actually could see this being way down the road here, a third of the size, which would be a 6x from here. So that alone gives me some promise for Pinterest where I think it could be. But for the next 5 years, let's look at some numbers here. So these are using 2020 full year numbers. Revenue was $1.7 billion, and they were slightly negative with a net income of a negative $128 million. So a net profit margin of just about minus 8% and a price to sales ratio of nearly 32 times sales. They're expected to be profitable in the first quarter of 2021. So for this revenue, price projection, I used a compound annual growth rate of 40%. Now, Q4 of 2020, their growth rate was actually over 70%. And the full year, last year was 50%, and expected to be close to that rate here for 2021. But for 5-year rate, assuming it may decline a little bit in the back half of this 5-year projection, I've used a compound annual growth rate of 40%. And I've also assumed that they will actually gain some efficiencies as far as operating expenses and get their profit margin up to something comparable to Facebook, which is about a 35% profit margin. So I use that for my number. And revenues in 2026, 5 years from now, could be, based on a 40% compound annual growth rate, would put them at over $9 billion for the full year of 2025. So for my beginning of 2026 price prediction, I'm using those numbers. And I've actually used a PE ratio of 35, which would give it a forward PE of probably, assuming it's continuing to grow earnings, it would give it a forward PE of probably around the low 20s. So this is using a very similar numbers to Facebook, which is argued to trade very cheap with its current growth rate. So this would be, I think, this is quite a conservative number what we're using for the forecast here. But actually, I could see it trading at quite a bit higher than that as well. So we're using a conservative PE here. And that would give us a share price in 2026 of $177, which is a market cap of over $111 billion. So that's over a 2x from here. And that's a 107%, so that's a 107% return and nearly a 16% annual return on Pinterest over the next 5 years, which I'd take any day. But I mentioned I've been aggressively buying Pinterest here during this bit of a sell-off that we've had. And it's a new position for me, but I've actually built up to about a 5% weighting in my portfolio. And I was buying it closer to $70 a share. Just look at the share price here real quick. So it was trading at around $90 a share. And actually, during the sell-off here we saw in March, it traded down to as low as $60 a share on Pinterest. And I didn't get in quite that low, but a couple times where it hit around $70, I bought in, and now we're back to 85. So it sold off as much as 30% off the all-time highs, and now we're back at nearly $86 a share. So if you actually look at this number, if you can get in at closer to 70 here, look what that does to the total return here over the 5-year period. So if you can get in at $70 a share, if we see a little bit more of a sell-off, that would be a 20% annual return on Pinterest. And I really like to see that on these projections I do. If I can get to where we're seeing an annual return of 20%, I'm buying heavily on these stocks. So that's my price point for Pinterest. But even currently trading at around 86, I think it offers decent value here and good upside potential with a 15% annual return possible over the next 5 years. Obviously, anything can happen, and this is just my prediction. Obviously, we could see this trading at a higher PE multiple, which would obviously influence the share price as well. If this is trading at, say, a multiple of a PE of 45, so a forward PE probably be about mid-30s then. Obviously, look at that. We get a 20% return from here, even with from the current share price 86. Obviously, this is a lot of going to depend on companies' continued execution, and if Pinterest can continue to grow their customer base as far as advertising spend at this kind of rate. But I think 40% is really doable for Pinterest over the next 5 years. So there you have it. So Pinterest is a company that going into 2021, I had no position in, and now it's the 6th largest position in my portfolio. This is one of the companies that I took advantage of the sell-off and was buying aggressively in March. I actually did a lot of buying, as I mentioned in previous videos, in March, and I'm happy to have this company added to my portfolio. And I might be looking to add more if it gets down to 70 range, or definitely if it gets below that, I'll be aggressively buying Pinterest. I could see adding a little more to my position still if I get down there again. But right now, I'm happy to see it in the top 10 as far as position sizes. And I still think it actually represents pretty good value here, and especially on a pullback, get back into the 70s here. So that's what all I have. Thank you so much for watching, and best of luck investing.